Jai Hind. My dear students, to continue from the last speech of mine, as on 18th March 2020, wherein about the fact that how British was frightened of the INS approach towards Indian territory and the innovative two levels way of attacking on Allied force under the supreme command of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose that led Allied force to retreat and cost them the death of 12,000 trained armed forces or armed soldiers in Imphal and 6,000 armed soldiers in Kohima, while INA had lost 6,000 soldiers only. Side by side, they were losing their overlordship. The British were losing their overlordship towards Indian people because of their loyal subjects Nehru, Gandhi, coteries. Ineffective image prevailed in the eyes of common people in India and fast deteriorating or the fast decreasing their popularity. They understood their days were numbered in keeping India under their own control. Then they jointly started campaigning against Netaji and INA, fabricating fake stories to bring the situation in their own way just to divert the attention of the people of India. First, maligning Netaji as puppet of Tojo, picturizing here and there Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose on the pretext of INA, was ushering the Japanese force in India to invade. Second, the Communists and the Congress propagated Netaji as a dog of Tojo. They propagated in various ways that Tojo as master and Netaji was his pet. There are so many false fabricated propagandas against Netaji and INA taking place loudly through the medias, through miking in the localities so that the people could suspect INA and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. British and Congress frontliners took this sort of tactics and the communists were half-educated and selfish. They had nothing sense. Actually, they had nothing sense. They had no love for the country, under whose diktat they were following CPJB or Russian communist. It seemed that a dog's barking behind the majestic movements of a tiger. And Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was really the majestic Royal Bengal tiger. That was why ex-British Prime Minister dared to scold Nehru, Gandhi, Patel, Azad as rascals. Sometimes they called them scoundrels and compared them as the chastened schoolboys without any hesitation. But the same British did not even dare to make any slightest humiliation to Netaji. Not only that, the British did not even say any unparliamentary words against Netaji's colleagues in front of him. They were experienced in these happenings during Subhash Chandra Bose in Presidency College and in ICS probationers' remuneration in England. I think you must have idea of happenings in Presidency College, but I am cocksure that you do not have the information of ICS probationers' remuneration after the passing of ICS, that the officers were taken the probation period, and during that period they had to get remuneration from British government. So ICS probationers remuneration happenings in England. Just listen what happened during ICS probation story in his own words. Subhash Chandra Bose wrote in his biography in Indian Pilgrim, his autobiography, wherein he has written this in his own word. Quote, some months earlier, I had a passage at arms with Mr. Roberts over some printed instructions issued to civil service probationers by the India Office. Here, what do you mean by India Office? What is its function? India Office was a British government department established in London in 1858 to oversee the administration through a viceroy and other officials of British India. The department was headed by the Secretary of State for India, a member of the British Cabinet, who was formally advised by the Council of India. These instructions were under the caption Care of Horses in India. Care of Horses in India. This was the caption, and contained remarks to the effect that the India size means groom, eats the same food as his horse. It was a great insulting to the Indians, but no one were bothered about it. No Indians were bothered about it. Only Netaji had taken it seriously. And Netaji said in his autobiography, I naturally felt indignant. And I felt ashamed of it. When I received them, means Subhash Chandra said, when I received them and had a talk with the other fellow probationers mean Indian probationers, the fellow probationers who had also got them, we all agreed that the instructions were incorrect and offensive, and that we should make it a joint protest. And when the time came for us to write this, everybody tried to back out. Just see the nature of Indian. When the moment came, they themselves retreated. They wanted not to disturb the British for their selfish interest. Just see how the service was lucrative for the Indians. That was heaven-born service. Subhash Chandra Bose said himself, I grew desperate and decided to act on my own. I went straight to Mr. Roberts and drew his attention to the incorrect statements in the printed instructions. He flared up and said, look here, Mr. Bose, if you do not take up the official point of view, I am afraid you will have to clear out. This meant that it was a threat to Subhash Chandra Bose that he might be put to a problem. As far as Indian nature was concerned, Mr. Robert knew that Mr. Bose would be frightened of and kept himself away from this affair, and also kept himself mum in this regard. But Subhash Chandra was something different from other students, other probations. He went on arguing with Mr. Robert. In the words of Subhash Chandra Bose, again, so I calmly replied, Subhash Chandra is saying, so I calmly replied, yes, but what do you mean by the official point of view? Mr. Roberts realized at once that browbeating would not do, so he changed his tone and voice and remarked gently, what I mean is that you should not look out for offences. I replied that I had not looked out for offences, but that the instructions were there in front of me. At the end he came around me and said that he would draw the attention of the India Office to what I had told him. I thanked him and left. A fortnight later, means after 15 days, Mr. Roberts sent for me. This time he was very cordial. He read out a letter from the India office and which they thanked me for drawing their attention to the printed instructions and assured me that when the instruction will be reprinted, the necessary corrections will be made. Just think his capacity, just think the capacity of Subhash Chandra Bose. Only one man army. These happenings was also recorded in the Scotland Yard. Don't forget. So British was very much frightened of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose since his early student's life because of his strong personality, matured sense of politics, sensible farsightedness, and his erudition in every field. That was why the British every now and then incarcerated Subhash Chandra Bose in the notorious jails either in Mandalay in Burma or in cellular jail in Andaman and Nicobar. While Nehru, Gandhi, Patel, Azad and their coteries had not been put to suffer only one night, one single night as political prisoner in Mandalay and cellular jails, because they were the perfect bitches to the British, loyal subjects. British also considered them, they are the slaves actually. In 20 years of Subhash Chandra Bose's political career in India, he had to undergo incarceration for 11 times, and most of the time he was in Mandalay and in cellular jails, wherein he was affected with tuberculosis, for which he needed therapeutic treatment in Switzerland and in Austria. Now, my dear students, you can easily understand the differences between the role as Subhash Chandra Bose played against the British and the role Nehru, Patel, Gandhi coteries played against the British. Netaji's every stages of life are as voluminous, as valuable research topics in different segments of his life as may usher a new light in Indian socio-political horizon. And I am confident. I think his life and ideological part should be brought under as a prominent honors department in undergraduate and postgraduate for detailed studies in universities in India and abroad as Gandhi studied at the same. His childhood period was covering a full of sensible, meritorious and divinely sensational towards action in man, nation and mankind. Since his childhood, he had learned to love the motherland from his parents, obviously, his brothers also, his remarkable teacher Beni Madhav Das, and from the well-charactered, dedicated Swadeshis. So, if we do not clarify his earlier life, you cannot understand why British were so concerned about Subhash Chandra Bose rather than Nehru, Patel, Gandhi and Azad. British looked them as the talkative Indian slaves. They had the showmanship attitude. Nothing serious could be possible for them. First, I tell you his academic life, which was Netaji's first prominent phase, and then I will tell you his third prominent phase. Why and how British actually terrified by him. First, Netaji's remarkable academic career, you just see, was so admirable that Nehru, Patel, Gandhi, Azad and their coteries that in straight way they could not reach him. It was not that he was away from the social responsibilities at that time. He completely associated with the Swadeshis, social works and spiritual activities. Still his merit was so much better, was much more above those congressmen that you cannot imagine. As an actionist, how could he do? Even at the age of 12 years, he observed the birth anniversary of Khudiram Bose the great Martyrs, defying the whip of British. He was so desperate at his early life. This was also recorded in the British intelligence file. Throughout his school life, he was always placed within first, second and third position in the yearly examinations. In matriculation, he stood second in the university's order of merit. Actually, then the matriculation examination was conducted by the University of Calcutta. Then board council were not formed actually. Second means second. It was not so easy. You cannot imagine his scoring of number. Let's see his scoring. His total scoring was 609 marks out of 700. That is 87% marks carried. Is secured. Now see his scoring breakup. In English, first in English, he got 165 out of 200. That means 82.5% he scored. Second, in mathematics, he got 100 out of 100. That means 100% he scored. Third, in classical English language, he scored 95 out of 100. That means 95% is scored. In vernacular means Bengali, he scored 71 out of 100. That means 71%. Fifth, in additional mathematics, he scored 88 out of 100. That means 88%. In additional classical languages, he scored 90 out of 100. Additional classical languages means also English. That means 90%. This was his scoring in matriculation. And you the boys, can you imagine what sort of merit Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose possessed in his time? While I am confident that the family of any family members of Nehru, Gandhi, Patel, Azad and their coteries cannot bring their numbers out to public because they would feel ashamed of if Subhash Chandra's numbers put before them. He admitted into Presidency College in Calcutta for studying BA in 1913. And the system then was that first 2 years in college it was intermediate. And after 2 years it will be graduation, that means BA or BSc. And then after 2 years it would be masters, MSc or MA. During this time, the most circulated happenings related to misbehave by Professor Oten to his classmates in the college, which was taken to the notice of the government. Subhash Chandra Bose was of the opinion to Professor Oten to say sorry to this affair, and the college authorities were adamant, and ultimately Subhash was expelled from the college. I will discuss it with you after this session. In this turmoil situation, he had to appear in the intermediate examination in the year 1915. He scored 637 out of 1000. That means 63.7%. It was not so easy, but in his opinion it was bad. Now see his scoring breakup. First, in English, he got 171 out of 300. That means 57%. Second, in vernacular, he got 74 out of 100. That means 74%. Third, in second language, he got 123 out of 200. That means 60.15%. In logic, he got 108 out of 200. That means 54%. In mathematics, he got 161 out of 200. That means 80.5%. So my dear student, before you go to analyze his poor numbers in this intermediate examination, I just bring to your notice that he always scored good in mathematics, either in matriculation or in intermediate, despite his comparatively bad results in intermediate. But he scored good. He scored good in mathematics. Now I tell the causes behind such performance as he confessed that 2 years of his stormy life had minimized his studies. Though he passed in first division, but his name appeared at the bottom of the list, for which he filled with regret, and he promised that he'd do better in the B examination. This was his confession. Actually, what happened? Subhash Chandra Bose had been following the way of Swami Vivekananda as a wandering monk. He was very much a religious person, and he wanted to follow the religious practice in future. He preferred to lead a spiritual life, as and when he studied the books on Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. So he went to search a perfect guru in 1914 in the pilgrimages. He moved from hills to plains. When he reached Benares and suddenly met with Swami Brahmananda, the president of Belur Math, who advised him to work for the liberation of the country and emancipate the countrymen from the British yoke. Then he returned. During his wanderings, he lapses a good number of time for which he could not make up his study. So his result was not come up to the mark. In this violent situation, he admitted further into Scottish Church College with the help of Sir Asutosh Mukherjee for BA with honours in philosophy in 1919. He appeared BA examination in the year 1919. He scored 822 out of 1300, that means 63.2%. He was placed first class second honours in philosophy, and then he received the Pratap Chandra Memorial Medal for Natural Theology and the William Smith Award for standing fast in the honours paper. This was his bright academic career in India while he was completely involved in socio-political movements. Next, his father's order, he had to go England for appearing ICS. Then it was 8 months to go for the examination of ICS to be held at London. The subjects were as follows: English, composition, Sanskrit, philosophy, English law, political science, modern European history, English history, economics, geography. Over and above, he had to do the surveying and map making and map pointing. So far as I am concerned, means cartography. Map making means cartography for the geography paper, and to learn something of French in connection with the modern history paper. Only 7 months study. Only 7 months study time he got to prepare, which was enough for him to stand forth in ICS examination. And it's very funny. Well, 7 years time was too short for Nehru, being guided by English teachers in England, to be an ICS. But unfortunately, it was not unfortunate, it was his regular course of actions, regular results. He could not achieve this. He had to return India as a barrister of Bharat law instead of ICS. But Subhash Chandra has got only 7 months, and he stood forth in the examination and fast in English and became ICS. All these things were recorded in British intelligence, so British were not fooled at all. They measured the capacity of Netaji, and that was why British were so terrified by his huge potentialities right from his student's life. That's all for today. That's all for today, my dear students. I just put before you the words of Netaji, which is said during declaring war against Allied force on 24th October 1943, just after 5 minutes past 12 o'clock at midnight. In his own words, the British know very well that I say what I mean and that I mean what I say. I mean war, that is war. Yes, British knew very well that Subhash Chandra Bose was a man of war. What he said was done by him at any cost. Thank you, my dear students. Next, I will tell you that what time Netaji was how terrible and why the British were so terrified by his disappearance and by his words and deeds. Jai Hind.